The soft clink of silverware and the mellow glow of candlelight made dinner feel warm, almost intimate. Victor was swirling his wine when he leaned back and said, almost offhand, "By the way, I'll be gone next weekend. Corporate workshop, big client, mandatory." He made it sound so important, like one of those career moments that could change everything. I smiled, feeling that familiar wave of pride I always did when he talked about his work. Of course, I wanted to be part of it somehow. I offered to help him pack, maybe even tag along if partners were allowed. But the shift in his face was instant. "It's strictly employees only. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway," he said, his fork pausing mid-air. His eyes dropped to his plate like the conversation had already ended. It was a small thing, that quick dismissal, but it didn't feel small. It landed with a weight I couldn't quite name. I tried to move on, talking about the weather, about the wine. Still, something in me stayed unsettled. I'm not the kind of woman who jumps to wild conclusions. Trust had always been our anchor. But the way he shut the door on my suggestions so fast, it left a splinter in my mind I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried to focus on dessert. I kept replaying that moment in my head as I cleared the table, the words "you wouldn't enjoy it," looping like a song I couldn't turn off. What did he mean by that? He knew I loved events, that I could talk to anyone in a room. We'd been to plenty of his corporate functions before, and I'd always fit right in. It wasn't about enjoyment. It felt like something else entirely. Victor carried his plate to the sink, humming softly, as if nothing about our conversation had landed any differently for him. I caught myself studying him, the way he avoided my eyes, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. Maybe I was overthinking. But then again, maybe I wasn't. It's strange how sometimes your gut whispers before your mind can catch up. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I listened to the sound of the shower running. My mind wandered to a dozen harmless explanations, and a few that weren't. I told myself to let it go. But I also knew that once a seed of doubt is planted, it has a way of growing, quietly, in the dark. By morning, the doubt hadn't faded. If anything, it felt sharper. Over coffee, I watched Victor scroll through his phone, his thumb moving fast, like he was racing to get through something before I could see. He looked up, smiled briefly, then set the phone face down on the table. It was such a small gesture, but it sent a tiny chill through me. He used to share everything so openly. Why did it suddenly feel like there was a door closing between us? I asked him what the workshop would be like, who else would be there. He gave vague answers, brushing past the details like they didn't matter. "Just the usual," he said. "Boring stuff. You'd hate it." His voice was calm, but there was a subtle edge there, a warning not to push further. I felt that edge, sharp against my curiosity. I smiled, pretending I believed every word, but my mind was already filing away each little inconsistency. I didn't know it yet, but that moment, that casual breakfast conversation, would be the first thread I'd pull. And once I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. The next morning, after Victor left for work, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a fresh cup of coffee. At first, I told myself I was just being a supportive wife, checking to see if I could somehow get involved in the event. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. I needed to quiet that gnawing little voice in my head. I typed the name of his company into the search bar, adding "weekend workshop" to the query. It didn't take long to find it. There it was. Bold letters on the company's own website, complete with a smiling photo of last year's attendees. And to my surprise, the event was open to the public. Not only that, but the itinerary mentioned a dinner where spouses were welcome. My stomach tightened. Every detail contradicted what Victor had told me. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold. A dozen questions raced through my mind, but one thought rose above the rest. If he lied about this, what else was he lying about? I could feel my pulse in my ears, and suddenly, I wasn't just curious. I was determined. I clicked through every link I could find, scanning the guest list, the schedule, even the promotional photos from previous years. Familiar names popped up, people Victor had mentioned before, and several had their partners smiling beside them in the pictures. So why exactly would I hate it? Why had he shut me down so quickly? The more I read, the less it made sense. A slow, deliberate kind of resolve began to form. I wasn't going to confront him yet, not without something solid. Instead, I decided I'd show up, quietly, unannounced. I pictured the look on his face when he saw me walk in, dressed to the nines, smiling like I'd been there all along. Part of me hoped it would be a pleasant surprise. Another part, well, that part feared it wouldn't be. I grabbed my phone, booked my ticket, and added the event to my calendar. As the confirmation email hit my inbox, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was a mission. And missions have a way of uncovering more than you bargain for. That afternoon, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed. Grocery shopping, folding laundry, even texting Victor a quick, "Hope your day's going well." But inside, my mind was running at full speed. I kept imagining the ballroom described on the website, polished floors, round tables draped in white linen, the faint hum of polite conversation. And somewhere in that room, Victor. Or at least, that was the plan. When he came home that evening, he was in a good mood, chatting about how busy things had been and how next weekend is going to be exhausting. I nodded, feigning sympathy, but my focus was on the way his eyes seemed to light up a little too much when he mentioned the trip. If I hadn't already seen the truth online, I might have believed every word. As I lay in bed that night, the plan felt even more certain. I'd be there. I'd see for myself. And no matter what I found, one thing was already clear. The version of the weekend he'd sold me didn't exist. The morning of the workshop, I took my time getting ready. If I was going to show up unannounced, I wanted to make an entrance. I chose a deep emerald dress that always brought out my eyes, paired with heels that clicked confidently against the floor. As I slipped on my earrings, I caught my reflection. Calm on the outside, but underneath, my pulse was quick and restless. The drive to the hotel felt longer than it should have, each red light a chance for my mind to wander into what-if territory. What if he was thrilled to see me? What if he was not? I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing on the fact that I was about to get answers, one way or another. When I arrived, the hotel was buzzing with energy. People in business attire clustered in the lobby, greeting each other warmly. I checked in, my name sliding easily onto the guest list, and followed the signs toward the conference room. My heart lifted slightly with each step. But when I walked in, scanning the tables for his familiar face, there was nothing. No Victor. Not even a seat with his name on it. I stood there for a moment, trying not to look lost, but my eyes kept sweeping the room. People were settling in, some sipping coffee, others flipping through the event programs. I finally approached a staff member near the stage, a polite smile fixed on my face. "Hi, could you tell me if Victor, my husband, is scheduled to attend?" She glanced at her tablet, scrolling for a few seconds before looking back at me. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have anyone by that name registered for this workshop." It was as if the air got thinner. My polite smile held, but inside something shifted. I thanked her quietly and stepped away, my heels clicking against the floor like a metronome for the pounding in my chest. This wasn't about running late or missing a session. He wasn't here. He was never meant to be here. I pulled out my phone, my fingers moving almost on instinct, dialing a coworker of his I knew casually. When he picked up, I kept my voice light. "Hey, just curious. Is Victor enjoying the workshop?" There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Oh, I thought he was off for a weekend getaway with, you know." My hand tightened around the phone. No, I didn't know. Not yet. I ended the call quickly, murmuring something about having to run, but my mind was already racing. You know. Those two words felt like they had a pulse of their own, echoing in my head as I walked back through the hotel lobby. The scent of fresh coffee and polished wood filled the air, but all I could smell was the faint metallic tang of betrayal creeping in. Outside, the sun was too bright, almost mocking. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, clutching my purse like it might hold the answers. I didn't have proof, not the kind you can't argue with, but the pieces were starting to arrange themselves in a way that made my stomach twist. If he wasn't here, then where was he? And who was worth lying to me for? I started the car, gripping the wheel a little tighter than usual. My mind kept bouncing between the urge to call him right then and the need to wait, to collect more, to make sure. Because once I confronted him, there'd be no going back. And I wanted to be ready when the truth finally showed its face. That night, I waited for him in the living room, the lamp casting a warm but deceptive glow across the space. My coat was draped neatly over the arm of the couch, my keys on the table, like I'd just gotten home myself. When I heard his car pull into the driveway, my chest tightened. I told myself to keep my voice calm, my face unreadable. He walked in, smiling faintly, and set his bag down. "Hey, you're home early," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I pulled back slightly, not enough to cause a scene, but enough for him to notice. "Where were you today?" I asked, my tone light but precise. "Because you weren't at that workshop." His eyes flickered, just for a second, before he laughed, shaking his head. "What are you talking about? Of course I was there." The way he said it, like I was being silly, made my pulse spike. I didn't let my gaze drop. "Don't lie to me, Victor." My voice was still steady, but inside the storm was building. He let out a short, sharp sigh, running a hand through his hair. "Claire, you're overreacting. You always do this." The words landed like tiny darts, meant to sting and distract. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, my eyes locked on his. "I spoke to someone at the event. They don't even have you registered." "So, I'll ask again, where were you?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually tell me. But then his expression shifted into that infuriating mix of defensiveness and mockery. "You've been checking up on me now? That's cute." My fingers curled into the fabric of my skirt, holding myself back from shouting. "If there's someone else, just say it," I pressed, my voice low but cutting. His reaction was instant, a flare of anger in his eyes. "There's no one else," he snapped, his tone louder now, sharper, like he was trying to end the conversation by force. But the thing about truth is, it doesn't hide well under volume. And I could see it, the flicker, the guilt he didn't want me to catch. I stayed quiet for a beat, letting the silence stretch between us until it felt heavy enough to make him shift his weight. "Then why won't you look me in the eye and answer the question?" I asked, my voice softer now, but laced with something he couldn't ignore. He rubbed the back of his neck, muttering something about not needing to explain every detail of his day. That was all the confirmation I needed. Not in words, but in the way his gaze kept darting toward the door. Finally, he grabbed his keys, muttering about needing some air, like the walls were closing in on him. He didn't slam the door, but the click of it shutting felt final, like a thread snapping. I sat there, the faint smell of his cologne still hanging in the air, my hands folded in my lap. In that moment, I knew this wasn't about guessing anymore. It was about proving it. And once I had proof, there'd be no room for him to twist the truth into something it wasn't. The days that followed were a blur of quiet calculation. I didn't cry, didn't beg. I simply observed. Every bank notification, every stray receipt, every timestamp became a piece of a puzzle I refused to stop building. It didn't take long before I had what I needed. Hotel charges that didn't match his itinerary, a dinner for two billed to a romantic restaurant, and a travel receipt under a woman's name I'd never heard before. The moment I printed it all out and slipped it into a neat folder, I felt an eerie calm wash over me. The kind of calm you get when the storm has already passed in your mind and all that's left is the cleanup. I wasn't going to scream at him in private, no. This was going to be the moment he showed his real face to everyone who thought they knew him. I arranged a family dinner for the night he was supposed to be back from yet another work trip. His parents, his siblings, all of them sitting at our long dining table, sipping wine and making polite conversation. They had no idea that before dessert, their son and brother's carefully curated image would shatter like glass on tile. When Victor finally walked through the door, his smile froze the second he saw the table full of expectant faces. "What's all this?" he asked, hanging his jacket with forced casualness. I stood, my folder in hand, and motioned toward the empty chair beside me. "Sit. We've been waiting for you." He glanced around, clearly searching for an escape that didn't exist. I slid the folder across the table, the papers fanning out just enough for the bold headers to be visible. Hotel invoices, restaurant receipts, her name printed in black and white. "Your workshop sounded amazing," I said evenly, my eyes never leaving his. "Especially the part where you didn't go." The room went still, forks frozen midair, conversation cut clean. For a beat, no one spoke. His mother's brows knitted together, his father's jaw tightened, and his sister's gaze darted between us like she'd stumbled into the middle of a movie she couldn't pause. Victor's face drained of color, but before he could stammer a denial, a sharp chime from his phone broke the silence. His phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up with an email notification, the subject line in bold, unmistakable, "HR notification, report filed." I didn't have to explain it. They all knew I'd already made my move. His hand twitched toward the phone, but he stopped, as if touching it would only confirm the reality in front of him. I reached for my coat draped over the back of my chair, sliding it on with slow, deliberate movements. "I won't waste anyone's time pretending this can be fixed," I said, my voice steady, even gentle. "So I'll leave you to explain it to them." I nodded toward his family, their eyes locked on him like strangers meeting for the first time. With my bag over my shoulder, I walked to the door, each step lighter than the last. Outside, the evening air felt crisp, almost cleansing. My car waited at the curb, already packed for a trip I'd been planning in silence. My own workshop, I thought, the one where I learn how to live without him. And as I pulled away, I didn't look back.
A music box. I stared at the small wooden object sitting on the attorney's desk. My grandfather left his entire fortune to my cousin, but all I get is a broken music box. Attorney Philip Hargrove adjusted his glasses nervously. "Ms. Winters, I understand your disappointment, but according to Dr. Elliot Winters' final will and testament, this is indeed your inheritance." Across from me, my cousin Victor couldn't hide his smug smile. "Don't look so shocked, Melody. You abandoned the family business years ago. What did you expect?" My name is Melody Winters, 29 years old, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed my relationship with my grandfather, the brilliant Dr. Elliot Winters, founder of Winters Pharmaceuticals, had been special despite my decision to pursue music instead of medicine or business. The small wooden box mocked that belief. "There must be some mistake," I said, picking up the box. It was beautiful craftsmanship, antique walnut with intricate carvings, but the mechanism was clearly broken. When I tried to wind it, nothing happened. Grandfather and I were close. He wouldn't just. "The will is quite clear," Hargrove interrupted, sliding a document toward me. "To my granddaughter Melody, I leave my music box, which she will find more valuable than she initially realizes. To my grandson Victor, I leave controlling interest in Winters Pharmaceuticals and all remaining assets." Victor stood, buttoning his designer suit. "Well, if that's all settled, I have a company to run. The board is expecting me." He gave me a condescending pat on the shoulder. I'll have accounting send you a small stipend, Melody, family obligation, and all that. I jerked away from his touch. Don't do me any favors, Victor. After he left, I remained sitting across from Hargrove, staring at the music box. Was there anything else? I asked quietly. Any message? A letter? Hargrove hesitated, then reached into his desk. There was this. Your grandfather asked that I give it to you privately. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name and grandfather's distinctive handwriting. I tore it open, my hands trembling slightly. My dearest Melody, if you're reading this, then the inevitable has happened. And Victor has likely already begun calculating how quickly he can dismantle everything I've built. Don't be deceived by appearances. What seems worthless may contain the greatest value. You, of all people, understand that music is more than just pleasant sounds. It's mathematics, precision, patterns. The music box contains a puzzle only you can solve. Remember our conversations about Backed? About hidden messages in plain sight? Trust no one at Winters until you understand what the box truly contains. Victor will stop at nothing once he realizes what I've done. All my love. Grandfather. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my pocket. Hargrove watched me expectantly. Is everything all right, Ms. Winters? Yes, I lied, rising from my chair. Thank you for your time. Outside the law office, I hurried to my car, the music box clutched tightly against my chest. Batch. Hidden messages. What was grandfather trying to tell me? Our conversations about Backed had always centered around mathematical patterns and how the composer had hidden complex numerical sequences in his music. Grandfather had been fascinated by such things. Codes, puzzles, patterns within patterns. I drove directly to my small apartment, mind racing. I'd chosen a different path from what the family expected, pursuing a doctorate in music theory instead of joining Winters Pharmaceuticals. That decision had strained my relationship with my parents, but never with grandfather. He had supported me, funded my education, attended every recital. Now this music box was my only inheritance. There had to be more to it. At home, I cleared my desk and placed the box under my brightest lamp, examining it carefully. The craftsmanship was exquisite, hand-carved scenes depicting what appeared to be Greek mythology. I recognized Apollo with his lyre, but the other figures were unfamiliar to me. I tried again to wind it, but the mechanism remained stuck. Taking a deep breath, I gently pried off the bottom panel. Inside was a complex arrangement of gears and pins, the standard components of a music box, but arranged in a pattern I'd never seen before. Some of the pins seemed to be missing or deliberately removed. Tucked into a corner was a small paper scroll, yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I carefully extracted and unrolled it. Instead of the punched holes I expected, there was a musical score, handwritten notes for what appeared to be a short composition. At the top, in faded ink, Winter lied. Winter Psalm. A piece I'd never heard of. My phone rang, startling me. Victor's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Enjoying your inheritance? His voice dripped with condescension. Listen, Melody, I've been thinking. That music box might have sentimental value to the company. For the museum we're planning. I'll give you $50,000 for it. My heart raced. $50,000 for a broken music box? Victor was many things, but sentimental wasn't one of them. It was grandfather's gift to me. I replied carefully. I think I'll keep it. A pause. 100,000. Not interested. Don't be stubborn, Melody. You're a music teacher at a community college. You could use the money. Goodbye, Victor. I hung up. My suspicions growing stronger by the second. The music box contained something valuable, something Victor already knew about. I photographed the musical score and transferred it to my computer, then used my music notation software to recreate it. The piece was strange, just 16 bars, with an unusual time signature and key changes that made little musical sense. Following my instincts, I went to my electronic keyboard and played the piece. It sounded discordant, almost random. Not at all like something grandfather would appreciate. This wasn't about the music itself, it was about the pattern. I stayed up all night, analyzing the score from every angle. The note values, the intervals, the structure. Nothing made sense until I remembered grandfather's fascination with Bach's number symbolism. What if each note represented something else? A number? A letter? Around dawn, it hit me. The musical notes corresponded to numbers in a substitution cipher. A became 1B became 2 and so on. When I translated the melody line, it yielded a sequence of numbers. 38 to 45, 12 to 9, 16 to 7, 30 to 44. But what did these numbers mean? I was interrupted by a knock at my door. Through the peephole, I saw Dr. Helena Crane, grandfather's longtime research partner. She looked nervous, glancing repeatedly over her shoulder. Helena? I opened the door, surprised. What are you doing here? May I come in? She asked quietly. I shouldn't be seen here. Once inside, she spoke in hushed tones. Your grandfather warned me this might happen. Victor called an emergency board meeting this morning. He's shutting down your grandfather's special research division and selling the patents to Leon Pharmaceuticals. What special research division? Helena looked surprised. He didn't tell you? For the past 5 years, your grandfather led a small team developing a treatment for Korsakov's syndrome. We've had remarkable success, but Victor claims the research is economically unfeasible. Korsakov's syndrome, a rare neurological disease affecting fewer than 10,000 people worldwide, including my grandmother, who had died from it when I was a child. Grandfather had spoken of it rarely, but I knew her death had devastated him. Why would Victor shut it down if it's working? I asked. Because the treatment would be affordable, Helena explained. Your grandfather designed it specifically to be inexpensive to produce and distribute. Leon wants to buy the research so they can bury it. They have a different treatment in development, one they plan to charge hundreds of thousands per dose for. I thought of Victor's sudden interest in my music box. Helena, do you know anything about a Winterlied? She paled visibly. Where did you hear that name? I showed her the scroll from the music box, explaining grandfather's letter. Helena's hands trembled as she examined it. Winterlied was your grandfather's code name for the formula, she whispered. He was paranoid about corporate espionage in his final months. The complete formula and research data are hidden somewhere. He said he'd leave it where only the right person could find it. She looked at me with dawning realization. He meant you. But why me? I know nothing about pharmaceuticals. Because he trusted you, she said simply, and because Victor would never suspect. After Helena left, I returned to the numerical sequence with renewed determination. If these numbers were a key to finding grandfather's hidden research, what did they unlock? I tried coordinates, dates, various ciphers. Nothing worked. Frustrated, I picked up the music box again, studying the carvings more carefully. The figures I'd initially mistaken for Greek mythology were actually more specific. Each represented famous composers: Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, and there, nestled among them, was a tiny carving that didn't belong. A modern laboratory microscope. The incongruity struck me immediately. This wasn't an antique music box at all. It had been custom-made. I counted the composer figures. 8, the same number as my sequence. With trembling fingers, I pressed each figure in the order indicated by the numerical sequence. On the 8th press, I heard a faint click, and a hidden compartment in the base of the box slid open. Inside was a small USB drive and a handwritten note. The full symphony awaits. My phone rang again. Victor. Final offer, Melody. 500,000 for the music box. Right now. Something in his voice had changed, an edge of desperation. How did you know? I asked quietly. No what? False innocence. That there's something hidden in the music box. That it's worth more than your initial offers. A pause. I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm simply feeling generous toward my cousin. The board meeting this morning, shutting down grandfather's research on Korsakov's syndrome. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? Another longer pause. You've been talking to Helena. His voice hardened. Be careful, Melody. You're dealing with things you don't understand. The music box. Name your price. It's not for sale. I hung up. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with text messages, first from Victor, then from unknown numbers. Threats, bribes, warnings. I turned off my phone and inserted the USB drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of files, research data, clinical trial results, and most importantly, the complete formula for what grandfather had codenamed Winterlied. But there was something else. Financial records showing that Victor had been secretly negotiating with Leon Pharmaceuticals for months, planning to bury the Korsakov's treatment in exchange for a personal payout of $50 million. My grandfather had known. He discovered Victor's betrayal and created this elaborate puzzle to ensure his life's work wouldn't be destroyed by corporate greed. A crash from outside my door made me jump. Someone was trying to break in. I grabbed my laptop, the USB drive, and the music box and fled through the fire escape just as my door splintered open. I drove straight to Helena's house, calling her from a gas station payphone on the way. She was waiting for me when I arrived, along with another member of grandfather's research team, Dr. Abernethy. "We need to release this publicly," I told them, showing them the files. All of it, the formula, the research data, and Victor's deal with Leon. "If we do that, Winter's Pharmaceuticals could collapse," Helena warned. "Thousands of jobs lost." "Not if we move quickly," Dr. Abernethy countered. "The board doesn't know about Victor's side deal. If they see this evidence before he can complete the Leon transaction." A plan formed rapidly. Helena still had allies on the board. Dr. Abernethy had contacts in the scientific press. And I had something neither of them possessed: legal standing as a Winter's heir, even if my inheritance had seemed meager. That night we worked tirelessly, preparing a comprehensive package of information. By morning, it was in the hands of 3 board members, the FDA, and select science journalists known for their integrity. The response was swift and decisive. The board called an emergency session and suspended Victor pending investigation. Leon Pharmaceuticals publicly denied any improper negotiations. And most importantly, grandfather's research was saved. 2 weeks later, I sat in what had been Victor's office, now temporarily mine, as the board determined the company's future. The music box sat on the desk, now fully restored and playing a beautiful melody, the real Winterlied, not the coded version. Grandfather had composed it for my grandmother during her illness. Helena entered with a stack of documents. "The board's decision is unanimous. They want you to take over as chairperson." I laughed in surprise. "Me? I don't know the first thing about running a pharmaceutical company." "You know the most important thing," she countered. "The purpose of medicine isn't profit, it's healing. Your grandfather always said you were the only one who truly understood that." I picked up the music box, listening to its delicate melody. My grandfather had built a pharmaceutical empire, but his true legacy wasn't measured in dollars or market share. It was measured in lives improved and suffering eased. "The Korsakov's treatment," I said finally. "How soon can we bring it to market?" 6 months, maybe less with proper funding. Make it a priority, and I want it affordable, just like grandfather intended. "Victor will fight back," Helena warned. "He still owns shares in the company." I smiled, thinking of the additional files I hadn't yet revealed. Evidence of other ethical breaches that would keep Victor too busy with legal defense to challenge my position. Let him try. The music box continued its gentle melody, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable inheritances aren't the ones that come with impressive titles or massive bank accounts. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone who knows how to truly listen. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at the announcement of the Elliott Winters Foundation, a new nonprofit dedicated to developing affordable treatments for rare diseases. The board had unanimously approved using a significant portion of company profits to fund it. On a table beside me sat the music box, now the symbol of our new corporate mission. As I addressed the crowd of scientists, patients, and press, I could almost feel grandfather standing beside me, his hand on my shoulder. "The true measure of value," I told them, "isn't what something costs, but what it's worth." And that's a distinction that makes all the difference. In my pocket was a small note I'd found hidden in a different compartment of the music box, one that had only revealed itself after the mechanism was fully repaired. Its message was simple but profound. Music and medicine share the same heart. Both exist to bring harmony where there is discord. Never forget that, my melody. I hadn't inherited a fortune in the traditional sense. I'd inherited something far more valuable. A purpose. And unlike Victor, I understood the true worth of what had been placed in my hands. Sometimes the smallest gift contains the greatest treasure. You just need to know how to unlock it. A garden shed. I stared at the attorney in disbelief, my voice echoing in the mahogany-paneled conference room. My grandmother left her entire estate, the mansion, the vineyard, everything, to my cousins, and all I get is a garden shed. Gerald Hoffman, the family attorney for over 40 years, shifted uncomfortably in his leather chair. Ms. Rivera, I understand this must be disappointing, but the terms of Rosalind Blackwood's will are quite specific. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and continued reading. To my granddaughter Olivia, I leave my gardening sanctuary at the edge of the eastern woods and all its contents, along with the parcel of land extending 20 yards in all directions from its walls. My cousins, Julian and Charlotte, exchanged smug glances across the polished table. Charlotte barely suppressed a laugh behind her manicured hand. There must be some mistake, I insisted, fighting to keep my voice steady. I spent every summer with Grandma Rose. We were close. She wouldn't jest. Well, you haven't exactly been around the last few years, have you? Julian cut in, his voice silky with false sympathy. While you were off playing with plants at university, Charlotte and I were actually helping grandmother manage the estate. I bit my tongue. I hadn't been playing with plants. I'd been completing my doctorate in botanical pharmacology, researching medicinal properties of rare plant species. But that had never impressed my status-conscious family. My name is Olivia Rivera, 28 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I believed my connection with my grandmother, the formidable Rosalind Blackwood of Blackwood Estates, transcended the family politics that had driven me away from home. Is there anything else? I asked, struggling to maintain my composure. Hoffman nodded, producing a sealed envelope. Your grandmother asked that this be delivered to you privately after the reading. I took the envelope, ignoring Charlotte's curious stare. My grandmother's elegant script spelled my name across the front. Well, if that's everything, Julian said, rising to his feet. Charlotte and I have a meeting with the vineyard manager. We'll need to discuss transition of operations. He glanced at me with barely concealed triumph. Don't worry, Liv. You can stay in the guest house for a few days while you sort out your plans. After they left, I remained seated, turning the envelope over in my hands. She loved you very much, Hoffman said quietly. More than perhaps you realize. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and left with my letter and the key to my grandmother's garden shed. The drive to Blackwood Estates twisted through the California wine country, each familiar landmark intensifying my sense of betrayal. The grand iron gate still bore the family crest, an oak tree with roots that formed the letter B. The security guard nodded solemnly as I passed. News of the inheritance already spread among the staff. I avoided the main house, driving instead down the gravel path that led to the eastern woods. My grandmother's garden shed had always been her private retreat, off limits to everyone except me. As children, Julian and Charlotte had teased me mercilessly about being the garden girl allowed into Grandma's sacred space while they were banished to the tennis courts and swimming pool. The small stone building came into view, nestled at the edge of the woods. From the outside, it looked like a quaint cottage from a fairy tale. Ivy-covered walls, a slate roof, and a wooden door with an iron handle worn smooth from years of use. Nothing about it suggested value beyond sentiment. I parked and sat in my car, finally opening my grandmother's letter. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then the inevitable has come to pass, and you're likely feeling confused and hurt by what appears to be a meager inheritance. Before you judge an old woman too harshly, I ask that you remember our conversations about appearances and perception. The garden has always been more than it seems, as you, of all people, should understand. What others see as a humble retreat, we recognized as a sanctuary of possibilities. I'm reconnecting with my roots, I said, unable to resist the pun she wouldn't understand. Thanks for the offer, but the answer is no. The next morning, I woke early and drove to Gerald Hoffman's office, bringing the journal and patent documentation. His eyes widened as I explained my discovery. Your grandmother was more strategic than any of us realized, he said, reviewing the papers. These patents alone are worth hundreds of millions, and the research potential of the plant collection, he shook his head in amazement. Julian and Charlotte have been working with Golden Tree Pharmaceuticals, I told him. They were planning to sell everything once they controlled the estate. Hoffman nodded grimly. Your grandmother suspected as much. That's why she structured your inheritance the way she did. The garden shed and the 20 yards surrounding it in each direction contains the only access point to the most valuable part of the collection. So without my cooperation, they can't access or sell the most important specimens, and they have no legal claim to the patents. You effectively control the true Blackwood legacy. I left Hoffman's office with a plan in place. By noon, security experts were changing the locks and installing a sophisticated alarm system at the garden shed. By evening, I had filed injunctions preventing Julian and Charlotte from conducting any excavation on the estate without proper environmental impact studies. Studies that would inevitably reveal the underground complex they thought was their secret. 3 days later, I sat in the garden shed, cataloging specimens when I heard cars approaching. Julian and Charlotte arrived with a man in an expensive suit, presumably from Golden Tree Pharmaceuticals. "This is private property," I called out as they approached the door. "Don't be childish, Olivia," Julian said, his composed facade cracking slightly. "Mr. Doherty has come all the way from San Francisco to discuss a business opportunity that could benefit all of us." "How thoughtful," I replied, stepping outside to meet them. "But I've already had some interesting discussions with Hoffman about the underground botanical research facility and the patent portfolio." The color drained from both my cousins' faces. Mr. Doherty looked between us, confused. "Patent portfolio?" he asked. "Oh, did my cousins forget to mention that part?" I smiled pleasantly. "All the pharmaceutical patents derived from the botanical specimens are held in my name, not theirs. Has been for years." "That's impossible," Charlotte spluttered. "Grandmother left us the estate." "She left you the house and the vineyard," I corrected. "Lovely property, terrible investment compared to what's under it. But then you never did pay attention to her gardening hobby, did you?" Mr. Doherty cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting once the family has sorted things out." After he departed, Julian turned on me, fury in his eyes. "You think you've won? We'll contest the will. We'll claim she wasn't competent." "You could try," I agreed. "But then I'd be forced to make public her final journals, including her documentation of your secret meetings with Golden Tree, planning to sell off her life's work the moment she died. I wonder how that would look to a judge." 1 week later, I sat with Julian and Charlotte in Hoffman's office, a new agreement between us drafted and ready for signatures. I didn't have to wait until midnight. I knew where the moonflowers grew in a secluded clearing about 50 yards from the shed. Grabbing a flashlight, I followed the path into the woods, guided by memory and the glowing map now impressed in my mind. The moonflower clearing appeared unchanged, a perfect circle of the pale, luminous blooms that opened only at night. But now, seeing it with fresh eyes and my grandmother's cryptic message in mind, I noticed something I'd overlooked before. The flowers weren't planted randomly, they formed a pattern identical to the constellation Cassiopeia, my grandmother's favorite. In the center of the arrangement stood a peculiar stone pedestal I'd always assumed was decorative. Examining it closely, I discovered a small keyhole concealed among the carved ivy leaves. My grandmother's key fit perfectly. When I turned it, the top of the pedestal slid open, revealing a hidden compartment containing a leather-bound journal and an antique silver key much larger than the first. The journal was my grandmother's, its pages filled with her elegant handwriting and detailed botanical illustrations. As I flipped through it, a folded document fell out. A deed and a map showing an extensive network of tunnels beneath Blackwood Estate, dating back to Prohibition when my great-grandfather had used them to store and transport illegal spirits. But my grandmother had reproposed them. According to her journal, the tunnels now house one of the most valuable botanical collections in the world. Rare medicinal plants, many thought extinct, growing in a perfectly controlled underground environment. The final pages revealed the truth. The real Blackwood fortune wasn't the vineyard or the mansion. It was the pharmaceutical patents my grandmother had quietly secured over decades, based on compounds derived from her rare plant collection. Patents worth billions, all assigned to a trust bearing my name. A text message made my phone buzz. $50,000 for the shed. Final offer. Julian. I smiled to myself. Julian had no idea what he was really bargaining for. The silver key opened a concealed door built into the hillside behind the moonflower clearing. Inside, stone steps descended into darkness. I followed them down, using my flashlight to guide the way. What awaited below took my breath away. A vast underground complex stretched before me, illuminated by specialized growing lights. Climate-controlled chambers house hundreds of plants, many I recognized from textbooks as extremely rare or presumed extinct. A state-of-the-art laboratory occupied one section, while another contained filing cabinets full of research data and patent documentation. This was my grandmother's true legacy, not a status symbol like the estate above, but a scientific treasure trove with the potential to transform modern medicine. As I explored, I discovered a small office with a computer and more recent journals. The most recent entry, dated just 2 weeks before her death, revealed another shock. Julian and Charlotte had discovered part of the underground facility months ago and had been negotiating with Golden Tree Pharmaceuticals to sell the entire collection, patents and all, once they inherited the estate. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had already moved the most valuable specimens to a section accessible only through the garden shed entrance. She had also transferred all patent rights to my name long before her death. My phone rang again, Charlotte this time. Julian told me about his offer, she said without preamble. I'm authorized to go to 75,000. That's more than generous, Olivia. It certainly would be, I replied calmly, if I were selling. Don't be difficult, she snapped. What could you possibly want with that shabby little building? You don't even live here anymore. I'm reconnecting with my roots, I said, unable to resist the pun she wouldn't understand. Thanks for the offer, but the answer is no. The next morning, I woke early and drove to Gerald Hoffman's office, bringing the journal and patent documentation. His eyes widened as I explained my discovery. Your grandmother was more strategic than any of us realized, he said, reviewing the papers. These patents alone are worth hundreds of millions, and the research potential of the plant collection, he shook his head in amazement. Julian and Charlotte have been working with Golden Tree Pharmaceuticals, I told him. They were planning to sell everything once they controlled the estate. Hoffman nodded grimly. Your grandmother suspected as much. That's why she structured your inheritance the way she did. The garden shed and the 20 yards surrounding it in each direction contains the only access point to the most valuable part of the collection. So without my cooperation, they can't access or sell the most important specimens, and they have no legal claim to the patents. You effectively control the true Blackwood legacy. I left Hoffman's office with a plan in place. By noon, security experts were changing the locks and installing a sophisticated alarm system at the garden shed. By evening, I had filed injunctions preventing Julian and Charlotte from conducting any excavation on the estate without proper environmental impact studies. Studies that would inevitably reveal the underground complex they thought was their secret. 3 days later, I sat in the garden shed, cataloging specimens when I heard cars approaching. Julian and Charlotte arrived with a man in an expensive suit, presumably from Golden Tree Pharmaceuticals. This is private property, I called out as they approached the door. Don't be childish, Olivia, Julian said, his composed facade cracking slightly. Mr. Doherty has come all the way from San Francisco to discuss a business opportunity that could benefit all of us. How thoughtful, I replied, stepping outside to meet them. But I've already had some interesting discussions with Hoffman about the underground botanical research facility and the patent portfolio. The color drained from both my cousins' faces. Mr. Doherty looked between us, confused. Patent portfolio, he asked. Oh, did my cousins forget to mention that part? I smiled pleasantly. All the pharmaceutical patents derived from the botanical specimens are held in my name, not theirs. Has been for years. That's impossible, Charlotte spluttered. Grandmother left us the estate. She left you the house and the vineyard, I corrected. Lovely property, terrible investment compared to what's under it. But then you never did pay attention to her gardening hobby, did you? Mr. Doherty cleared his throat. Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting once the family has sorted things out. After he departed, Julian turned on me, fury in his eyes. You think you've won? We'll contest the will. We'll claim she wasn't competent. You could try, I agreed. But then I'd be forced to make public her final journals, including her documentation of your secret meetings with Golden Tree, planning to sell off her life's work the moment she died. I wonder how that would look to a judge. 1 week later, I sat with Julian and Charlotte in Hoffman's office, a new agreement between us drafted and ready for signatures. This is highway robbery, Julian muttered, glaring at the document. It's actually quite generous, Hoffman countered. Ms. Rivera is offering you continued ownership of the mansion and vineyard, with the provision that the underground facility and its access points remain under her exclusive control. She's also offering a 10% share in future profits from the patents, which is 10% more than you're legally entitled to. And if we refuse? Charlotte asked. Then I'll exercise my right to the 20 yards in all directions from the garden shed, I explained calmly. which, if you review the survey maps, includes the main access road to the estate. I could make coming home rather inconvenient for you. They signed. 6 months later, Blackwood Botanical Research Center opened its doors in a new facility constructed adjacent to the original garden shed. Funded by licensing agreements with ethical pharmaceutical companies, we focused on developing affordable treatments derived from my grandmother's remarkable plant collection. Julian and Charlotte continued living in the mansion, hosting lavish parties and playing the role of wealthy vineyard owners. We maintained a cordial, if distant, relationship, united in public by the Blackwood name, separated in private by very different values. On the 1-year anniversary of my grandmother's death, I sat alone in the garden shed, now restored as a museum piece showcasing the beginnings of her botanical research. In my hands was the last of her journals, open to a page I'd read countless times. The true measure of a legacy isn't in what you accumulate, but in what you cultivate. Julian and Charlotte see Blackwood as something to possess and exploit. Olivia sees it as something to nurture and develop. In the end, wealth without purpose withers like a plant without water. Purpose without resources struggles like a seed on barren ground, but when the right person combines both, that's when true growth begins. Outside the window, the moonflowers were beginning to open in the twilight, their pale blooms luminous against the darkening sky. I'd expanded their garden, preserving the Cassiopeia pattern while adding new specimens around it. My grandmother had given me far more than a garden shed. She'd entrusted me with her life's work, her vision for the future, and the means to bring it to fruition. While Julian and Charlotte had inherited the Blackwood name and facade, I had inherited its heart and purpose. Sometimes the most valuable legacies are hidden beneath the surface, visible only to those who know where and how to look.